What's up, dudes? Max here. So again, I've had a really crazy past 48 hours between getting impressions from Final Fantasy VII Reunion, Crisis Core Reunion, as well as some Street Fighter stuff. But finally, I get to talk a bit about the little bit of time that I had with Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion. And this is a pretty exciting game for a lot of us because the obvious implications and connections that bring us closer to Rebirth are always tantalizing. Where the heck the story's going, why we're exactly preserving, you know, the Crisis Core story. Is there going to be any little things in this game that allude to that? That we obviously don't know yet, but that's the big question leading towards the eventual release date at the end of the year, which is coming out in December. But I did get a chance to play the game, and I will tell you, for anybody that is curious about my overall impressions of Crisis Core, while I do like certain parts of the original game, my revisiting replays of it have not specifically been great because of gameplay reasons. I do not think Crisis Core is a great playing game, and there's a lot of battle stuff that the game makes you do, and you spend a lot of time doing it, and it's relatively uninterrupted. There's a lot of issues in the old Crisis Core, man, that make fighting just very cumbersome, and that usually was at the result of input delay. So I'm happy to say that my first gameplay impressions of this game is that I don't hate the combat, right? Is it that much different than OG Crisis Core? Because this is easily the biggest question. Like, did they fix the dang gameplay of the game? And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I played Crisis Core back in 2020 before it was coming out, before Final Fantasy VII Remake was coming out. And almost every single fight, I just wanted to get through it. Right? I can't pinpoint exactly what it was between unskippable cutscenes or just the very laggy movement characters have, or the fact that, you know, things just boil down to this doing this one attack or this other attack and you don't even really use much of the materia system. Like, all the weird things that boil down to Crisis Core's old gameplay, I feel like they specifically tried to tackle in this game, because even with the very little snippet of gameplay we played from a very early save in the game, which starts at like one of the opening areas and some of the very opening boss fights. So you don't have a lot of crazy materia at your disposal, things that really give you modified movement or, you know, change your attacks or anything like that. So I can't say how crazy it might get, but the nice part is that I was actually enjoying fighting, right? It didn't, to me, it felt like, how different is this than the OG game? And the biggest difference is that I didn't absolutely despise the combat. So moving your character around, actually piloting Zack, selecting things on the menu, you know, going for weakness attacks that, you know, a fire character like Ifrit is going to be weak to ice or something like that, and then you follow up with the character's weakness already enabled. Like, all these things just felt good. Right? It felt a lot more action game-like than the weird hybrid of RPG action. Like Kingdom Hearts was obviously a very big influence on Crisis Core at the time when it came out in the late 2000s. And it's hard to tell you why it is so different and why it feels so much better and actually enjoyable to fight enemies in this game, but I was enjoying it. And I will say that there is still the materia melding system. There is still all the elements that were present in the previous game. It's just that they've been given a new shiny UI that is much more according to Final Fantasy VII Remake. So it all feels cohesive and obviously in the same world. The other question that I think a lot of people will probably be asking is story stuff as well as dialogue. And I can confirm that it feels like the majority of dialogue in the game has been redelivered, if not recast. So Zack obviously has the voice actor of Zack from Final Fantasy VII Remake. Aerith and other characters, especially Sephiroth, are also represented by current iterations. So that is being properly updated to sort of directly tie in to the events of Final Fantasy VII Remake, which makes sense. Like, as much as I love the old Zack voice actor, I think this guy's doing an absolute fine job. And we get to see what these actors are capable of in the span of a whole game. The problem is they're not given a ton to work with. If there's one thing about Crisis Core that anybody has played it with a little bit of perspective that is beyond the year 2007 or 2008, whenever it came out, the dialogue is hilarious. The majority of lines delivered by characters in the game are very much representative of the PlayStation 2 era of which this game came out and existed. And I wish that changed, right? I actually do wish that that was different in this game, that they gave it the Final Fantasy VII Remake spice, and we got characters saying different stuff. It's unfortunately not. It's like we get the voices of the current cast and the way they deliver their characters, but now they're just delivering the lines of a PS2 era, late 2000s, PSP game. And it's kind of funny, right? I will say it's nice to see some voice acting, like lip syncing in some situations, even though they said it won't line up too much because this was made specifically for Tokyo Game Show, and that stuff will be fixed later on. But there's the same amount of like old school sort of like cutscene jank and character rigs and stuff like that. That old little bit of jank of that era of PS2 games, that era of this PSP stuff is still there. So the cutscenes, while they do look significantly better, the character models do look way better. Their mouths and their facial rigs are moving in a way that is substantially better than the old school past PSP game. It does clearly look like a proper upgrade, but the things that are coming out of their faces are not the most engaging or dynamic. The story is going to be interesting, and all things considered, for anybody that hasn't played Crisis Core, the first half of the game is a little bit of a slog. Especially considering that this is going to be holding pretty similar and is practically a remaster in many ways. But the game does get genuinely fascinating past the halfway point when we start revisiting, when we go back to Nibelheim. And that's where, this is good. This is actually very, very interesting where they're going with these characters in this story. So I very much recommend you guys give this a shot when it eventually does come out. It does look like this is going to be a fairly faithful remaster / remake. And that's kind of a difficult way to justify, like, what is this? Is it a remaster? Is it a remake? It's kind of hard to say. Like, it doesn't go as far as like a Shadow of the Colossus or a Demon Souls or something like that. There is obviously a significant upgrade, and I feel like the biggest upgrade you see is in the visuals and the gameplay. And while it doesn't exactly come across as, we're just get Final Fantasy VII action system now, let's go. Like, no, it's not really like that. It definitely has a bit more of the precise movement and action speed that game sort of offers, being an action game. Like, you want to be able to actually press the dodge button and be able to move your character in a direction out of the way of enemy attacks. And in some situations in Crisis Core, the OG one, that just wasn't the case. Like, it just wasn't even worth using some of those buttons every once in a while. So you have to get used to a little bit of this stuff, right? The combat system is essentially a very much refined version of the older version of the game. And while it doesn't feel like it's substantially different, to once again reiterate, I was actually enjoying fighting things in this game. And I was going out of my way to go see if I can get into other battles to see how I can engage enemies and stuff like that. And I unfortunately couldn't. I only got like a couple of boss fights and some random enemy encounters, and that was about it. But for anybody that is curious, yes, like a lot of the same stuff is there. You have a dodge button, you have a block button. You also have the ability to cast magics via like a hotbar. You also get in that same hotbar like special abilities like an ice attack. You also get like a spinning attack that hits multiple enemies that cost your AP. The DMV gauge wasn't nearly as intrusive because if you wanted to skip it, you absolutely could. All the crazy flashback cutscenes that do happen to Zack can be skipped if you want, and that's fantastic. That's all. That stuff was the issues that made Crisis Core kind of such of a slog to play as far as a game, that it forced you to watch a lot of that stuff. So anyway, my impressions were pretty good. Like, not like to the moon first time seeing Final Fantasy VII Remake, like, oh my god, this is going to be game changing, this is ridiculous. I think this comes across as a, why would you ever play the original Crisis Core after this, right? This is going to be fixing so many issues that were present with the game. And it's funny that after playing Crisis Core back in 2020, I'm like, I'm good, man. I don't know if I ever need to actually play this game again. And after my little bit of a demo of some of these fights and figuring stuff out, I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually very much looking forward to not just the potential teasery stuff that could show up for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or connect to stories or anything like that. No, I'm actually looking forward to fighting things. I'm looking forward to the gameplay and getting new materia and figuring out how the materia melding system can give me new interesting stats. Like, the whole thing the original game sets up that sort of just throws it away, unfortunately, hopefully might be alleviated in this game. And that's kind of exciting. So Anyway, I'm going to leave you guys with a tiny little bit of footage of one of the boss fights, of just fighting something. I'll also be playing this as soon as it comes out, being the Final Fantasy VII head that I am. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. Appreciate any likes or thumbs up on the video. And another big shout out to Square for giving us this opportunity and not forcing us to go to Japan in order to get this footage. That's extremely generous of them. Take care, dudes. I'll see you next time.